Good day. This is E.T. in the beautiful sunny Australia. Today, in this era, it seems that image is so important to everyone. Some of us do not care about image. It's about substance. What are we really like? What are people really like? Not what the public image they portray. What is that? What messages are they saying? How are they in private? Which is none of my business. But image is just a veneer, just a picture. When it comes to government, or politics or democracy, it's all been about image and has been nothing to do with substance for so long. What has happened, especially since central banks have controlled the currency systems more and more and made sure that fewer and fewer get wealthier and wealthier, and whilst totally ignoring the times we're entering when that means there's fewer and fewer employments for the average people who need to get a job, and then governments are entertaining people or punishing people, put them in jail or whatever, rather than employ them in something practical and useful for society. Well, it's obvious a rethink is required about what democracy means, about what capital is, and how economics are run, and how the fiscal system is rethought about so that it's a fairer and more honest within the times we're in. Instead of pretending there's going to be work, there isn't going to be the employment. Intelligent people already know this, and politicians keep denying it at their peril and the peril to society. Or they are, if you like, abrogating their duty to by this denial that there will be jobs when there are fewer and fewer jobs because of many different reasons. In some ways, because of the way central banks have run and the way politics has used the currency system and stimulus to create monopolies and things like that, we've gone back to almost a pre-Christian Roman era in the way the system is run, but it's a little bit fairer in many ways than it was then. But it is degenerating because of the way the economics and the philosophy has been in the last few decades. It's degenerating as a system of being that sustains the people of the future. It is obvious a new sort of democratic process must be developed. Not one that involves any sort of revolution, but one that allows peaceful transition through 3 generations to a wiser and more humanistic future. This doesn't mean you can't have incentive, go out, work hard and try hard. But it means for those, there's only going to be such a limited amount of possibilities within that context of capitalism. It hardly any works in a growing population and a massive deficits when there are reducing in the potential to create work. That becomes a disaster for society and is in a way survival of the fittest. It's the worst form of Darwinism to be introduced into human systems you can possibly think of, and similar to what some other dictators in the past, who I will not name, have thought how society should be run. Eliminate the weak, eliminate the weak. That's the system we're in now. But there's a system I've been working on for many decades called Coopracy. It is based in a positive humanistic view of social progress through practical means to adapting how capital and economics and the fiscal system is perceived, and how what is basic and fundamental to all humans beyond the material is understood. as a precept for evolving the idea of equality so it makes natural sense beyond the politically correct version of equality which makes no sense and actually is there to cause trouble between people, because no one will discuss in a philosophical sense what equality means, so therefore it's a nonsense argument. It is an abuse of knowledge, science and the English language, used only to divide society by political forces whilst hoodwinking society at the same time, creating through this the means to ensure those within the sphere of political and financial interest involved with politics, whichever side of politics this is, left, right or centre, gain great wealth at the same time causing great deficit, whilst then blaming the unemployed and pensioners and the unstable as if they have had any say in any of the political process that has led to this divisive and primitive situation we are seeing within the world's democracies at the moment. When it comes to retirement or the provision of pensions, it is an act of total dishonesty to suggest retirement age should be raised. It's the most dishonest concept, an evil concept one has ever heard of. Any politician suggesting the retirement age should be raised should be totally ignored and thrown tomatoes at. Actual scientific equality means specifically retirement ages must be flexible to be humane. Not all humans are equal physically, emotionally or mentally, nor do they work in physically or emotionally equally demanding or not so employments. Therefore, to have morally justifiable equality, retirement must evolve to adapt to the unequal nature of human and the employments they have. This is the next great step in civilization, to understand that humans are not all equal, and within that understand how they can be treated so. So people as individuals are treated equally as in a scientific, pragmatic, practical, moral sense. If we take into account the actual employment deficit, it is very plain to see there is a chronic imbalance between need for full employment and actual media instructive political statistics, which are basically rubbish. This propaganda is meaningless to the actual facts of the employed numbers of able-bodied people. The average unemployment in Australia is probably about 20% if we take everything into account. Maybe it's more if we take away all the subsidies to employment, all the subsidies to major companies, all the subsidies to fiscal cartels, all the subsidies to training systems, all the subsidies to universities. There's a lot greater unemployment here in the true sense of the word, vis-a-vis how much productivity can afford to keep. We are totally making it waste of time being productive within the system. The unemployment at the moment is far, far higher than they'll ever admit, and that's a great shame. Governments themselves, state, federal in this country after Australia, and councils, whoever can get involved, place too many financially regressive obstacles and restrictions on employment, and therefore restrict people's liberty and freedom to employ their labour as they see fit. And they are therefore acting ignorant of nature, and they punish people. They punish people who are unemployed. They go and get a job, they cut off their doles immediately before they've had any chance to catch up. And it's a cruel system, and it's because the people who run this system are mean, greedy and selfish, and they think they're appealing to popular opinion by being cruel to people or unemployed for whatever reason. It places billions in hidden taxes on the unemployed, and all the levies and costs in trainings as tax on the unemployed that they don't care to admit, which finances fiscal cartels and agents of the government. Therefore, fiscal system, which is what is a tax upon, and reduces an economic function of the dole as it attacks the less well off, as well as employment itself. This employment system that they've got restricts the amount of people who can be employed. It's madness. It's done on purpose. They know there's not enough jobs, so they've got to put people on a run around pretending they're doing something about it rather than admit it. And at the same time they're creating disincentives on purpose. They have to be doing it on purpose. If they're not doing it on purpose, well then we have to conclude they're not very bright in the centre of the system altogether. They just don't understand the system. It also induces millions into expensive post-training debts for positions that the government knows by its own economic management and through the introduction of robotics are being destroyed by the day, making the employment deficit the greater deficit problem politicians choose to ignore. Corporate political parties have tied up so much of the Commonwealth into loss-making ventures such as housing and what are gambles on stock market to give impression of greater profit, so ever larger bonuses can be paid. Hence it is directly involved in the greatest loss-making capital venture of all, the security of the children's future of ordinary people. This pattern goes against any modern version of what capitalism must act within when there is a fiscal system if we're going to be responsible for the security of society. That is then abused because of the conflict of interest within corporate friends, and in doing this they are strangling the ability of the economy to employ easily far more than it can for pure distribution of wealth to the wealthy. They're strangling employment. Simply by adapting the human resource through time and space by its own volunteer participation, hours worked through a life can be equal, and be about 22 hours per week if people choose, and the equation that creates allows a real cost-effective support for the aged care homes, hospitals, schools, etc., and also those who work as nurses and manual workers who are physically demanding jobs because of genetic predisposition can retire earlier if they choose. People within finance must be allowed no say. No politicians. It must be a choice of the people how the retirement system is developed, not politicians who work for corporations, neither financial organisations. You should have no say whatsoever on anything to do with running a democracy. They should be totally ignored and sidelined as acting against it in every aspect of that meaning of that word. There are a total amount of hours available to employ the gross HR over the year. The gross human resource only needs to work so many hours over the year to attain the gross national product required to run the system. And that is being reduced through bad math economics, which is maths that are created to make some rich, whilst disguising that within legislation that looks like distribution, when it's actually all a mathematical equation made to break the economy at expense of employment while making fewer and fewer wealthier and wealthier. That's what the budget of the Malcolm Turnbull government is actually about. In other words, the mess is so bad in the last decade or so, or few decades, in the way they've done the fiscal system and the economy, they've actually created the problem. And it seems that they seem to be blind to the problem, or cannot admit what they're responsible for. Unless we can admit our faults, and what we've done and learn by that experience, we don't grow. So as time goes on, the government itself becomes infantile in its action, peevish, selfish and needy. And that's why we need to rethink about how government is, maybe looking at regional economics, how regions work to protect themselves from the largesse of corporations or corporate politics, and the central banks themselves need to rethink how they interact with society beyond the survival of the fittest narrative they're using, because that is out of date. Thank you. This is E.T. Good day.